And now Human Rights Watch has urged Bangladesh to protect Rohingya Muslims fleeing Myanmar.
Bangladesh has long urged that it cannot afford to host the Rohingya, and it is of course imperative for the international community to provide necessary assistance. However, under international law, Bangladesh may not summarily reject asylum seekers fleeing widespread human rights abuses or generalized violence. It is obliged Rohingya to enter the country and seek protection. HRW is speaking after Bangladesh threatened to send Rohingya refugees back to Myanmar. Now on Tuesday, Bangladeshi police detained dozens of Rohingyas, including several children. Some 500 refugees earlier arrived in Bangladesh after fleeing Myanmar. That brings the overall number of people who fled the country over the past week to over 2,000. And Myanmar's western state of Arkaan has been a scene of violence against the Rohingya at the hands of Buddhist extremists since 2012. UN says the Rohingya are one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. And Mr. Johnny Miller, a journalist, is joining us out of London for more. Let's get his take. Hello, Mr. Miller. Thanks for joining us on the program. Now, what Bangladesh is doing is clearly against the 1984 UN Convention Against Torture, where states are required to take effective measures to prevent torture in any territory under their jurisdiction. This is a quote, and quote, forbid states to transport people to any country that there's a reason to believe they will be tortured, but they're at the borders denying Rohingyas entry, turning them back when they know that their villages are being set ablaze and they're being targeted. What can you add to that?
Well, in one sense, I can understand the Bangladeshi position. I think the major blame for this has to lie with the Myanmar government. I was there in 2012, so I've seen the devastation that the government and local people have wrought on the Rohingya population. Whole areas, wherever Muslims live, their whole towns and villages and areas of other towns and villages were completely destroyed, burnt down, and that seems to be what's happening in the north of Rakhine state at the moment. 30,000 people displaced. So they cross over to Bangladesh. There's a river that separates the two countries. For Bangladesh's point of view, Bangladesh is a poor country. It's hugely overpopulated, and it says it can't accept these refugees. Meanwhile, Myanmar seems set on getting rid of the 1 million Rohingya population. So these people are not wanted by Myanmar, and you can, in some sense, understand Bangladesh's position of not wanting to accept them either. But the real problem here is the Myanmar government. 6 weeks ago, there was 9 police officers killed at the border. The Myanmar government blamed that on Rohingya militants. But this is no way an acceptable response, the displacement of tens of thousands of people, to that act.
And does it strike you odd as all that this is happening to the Rohingyas on a large-scale basis, their oppression, suppression, their marginalization, yet the central government there in Myanmar had sanctions lifted by Washington against them, and instead of having them imposed because of their treatment of of the Rohingya, we've seen the opposite. Help us make sense of that.
Well, you said earlier in your report that the Rohingya is the most persecuted group in the world. And they're also the most forgotten. It's in no country's interest to support their cause, not in Myanmar's, not in Bangladesh's, not in Western governments. It serves nobody's interest. Western governments, for example, and China as well, they have huge business interests in Myanmar. So why anger the Myanmar government over 1 million Rohingyas? So that's why there's very little international condemnation of what's happening.
So you're saying people turn a blind eye to them because they're an impoverished people?
Absolutely, and it's in nobody's interest to support them. And the level of hatred towards the Rohingyas in Myanmar as well is quite shocking. I've been there before, and it's hard to find many people who have any sympathy with the Rohingya people in Myanmar as well. You also have the increasing radicalization of some Buddhists in the country, particularly Buddhist monks. You'd expect Buddhist monks to be supporting peace initiatives, but many Buddhist monks in Myanmar are calling for the Rohingyas to leave the country as well. Most people in Myanmar think the Rohingyas are immigrants and they shouldn't be there. So for anybody who's covered the Rohingya issue over the last years, what's happening there shouldn't come as a surprise. And I think we're going to see more and more of this displacement and killing in the years to come unless something's done. But it seems difficult to see where any kind of pressure, apart from Human Rights Watch or the odd comment elsewhere, it's difficult to see where any kind of pressure is going to come from. But it really has to be from the United Nations or elsewhere.
Yeah, but you have satellite imagery showing that their villages are being set on fire, you know, by the government forces. You're seeing they're getting massacred, slaughtered. We've seen bodies on the ground, even children. Yet they're not allowing journalists into that part of Rakhine. They're not allowing human rights groups. But doesn't that speak for itself? How can the West turn a blind eye to that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the fact they're not allowing journalists in there. I mean, I was very lucky to be able to get in there in 2012, but we were threatened and told we've got to leave the country or leave that area now. And it's not surprising that they're not allowing journalists in, because the journalists there will overwhelmingly put the blame on the Myanmar government and the Myanmar security forces, and that's why they're stopping journalists getting out. The only kind of ray of light in this, and the only people I can see at the moment helping, are other Asian governments. Malaysia, for example, which is an overwhelmingly Muslim country, they have been taking some steps in criticizing Myanmar. They say they might boycott a football tournament that Myanmar is participating in. So I really think that Asian countries particularly have to stand up and try and sort out or try and put pressure on the Myanmar government, because it's in their locale and they're the ones most likely to do something about it.
Thank you much for your input and your contribution to the program, Mr. Johnny Miller, journalist, joining us out of London.